Well, here we are again. Welcome to another episode of Down Home. Kick your shoes off and set a spell and let's talk. Today's show is our Thanksgiving show. It's that time of year again where we all gather around the table with loved ones, and let's be honest, some not so loved ones, over a dried out turkey, a pan of dressing that has far too much sage in it, and burnt pumpkin pie to give thanks and, of course, catch up with friends and family. It's also that time of year where some southern mamas have their children looking like little Lord Fauntleroys running around so they can snap about 300 pictures to post to social media to tickle their egos with likes. So, without further ado, let's dive in. Today's featured food is, of course, chicken and dressing. I believe that's one of my, if not my absolute favorite meal. And now, let's be honest, there's a big difference between dressing and stuffing. From what I've observed, it seems like the northern United States refers to the dish as stuffing, where we here in the South refer to it as dressing. But they're two totally different things, without a doubt. Dressing is made in a separate dish apart from the bird. And I think generally nowadays stuffing is also made apart from the bird, but originally stuffing was meant to stuff the bird. It was cooked inside the bird, which you had to be very careful to cook it through and through, otherwise you could really get sick. And to me, it's just not appealing eating bread that has been stuffed and cooked into a turkey. There's also some spice differences and preparation of the bread for the dish when it's used as stuffing. But dressing is meant to be apart from the bird. It's to dress up the meal, to dress up the bird separately. And our featured Southern phrase for today is they were so poor they didn't have a pot to pee in nor a window to throw it out of. And I think that's pretty self explanatory. If someone didn't have enough money, they didn't have a pot. And where that saying comes from, back in the day before the advent of indoor plumbing, at night, instead of making you trail to the outhouse outside, a chamber pot was kept in the bedroom, generally under the bed. And during the night, you would use the chamber pot instead of having to go to the outhouse. And if you were poor, you wouldn't dedicate resources to a chamber pot because, of course, that costs money. And if you were poor, you might not have as many windows in your house. And anyway, I've heard that all my life, and that's a old saying that I still use, and I hear other people using. So how is everybody doing out there? Have you had a good week? It's been a good week here. I'm just so blessed I could step in manure and still keep singing Glory Hallelujah. So let's talk about a few things that I've noticed over the past couple of weeks. Arby's has a new dish available, steak nuggets. And I have to say, from the pictures, they look very tasty. And I fell for their marketing. So I bought me an order. And I'm not sure how I feel about it. Some were exceptionally tender and moist, which, by the way, I hate that word, but there's no other way to describe it. And then some of the other chunks in the cup were rock hard. But anyway, I thought I would get online and read some reviews over these steak nuggets, and of course, the internet didn't disappoint. Some of the descriptors I read for the nuggets were very interesting. One person called them roasted raccoon ankles. Another one referred to them as microwaved monkey meat. Another one called them muskrat medallions. So I think I'll skip out on getting a second order of those, but go out and try them. You might enjoy them. This time of year, one of my absolute favorite fast food dishes makes a return: McDonald's McRib. Every year they say this is the final year, this is the farewell tour. Just like so many singers out there, artists and performers. One that comes to mind is Cher. She's had about 24 farewell tours. Many other artists say this is it, this is the final tour, and end up having 16 years worth of tours to come afterwards. But anyway, I'm always glad to see the McRib return. I could eat four of them in one setting with no shame. Now, some may call them possum cutlets and barbecue sauce, and that's fine. Just go ahead and give me your share. If you have any fast food dishes that are seasonal, email me and let me know. Maybe we can talk about those on future shows. Oh, one more seasonal item that I forgot about that I really enjoy, and that's a couple of drinks from Starbucks. Now, I'm not a big Starbucks fan or supporter, but every year, this time of year, there are two drinks that I will line up in the drive through for. The first one is a pumpkin spice cream chai something or another, and the other one is the gingerbread iced chai. I don't know. There's about 10 words in the names of each one. And of course, Starbucks marches to their own drum. And so they don't have regular sizes, small, medium, or large. They have unique names for that. And I believe a large is a venti. And I always feel stupid saying that when I pull up to the drive-through. And those names they have for those drinks can be a mouthful, a tongue twister. But anyway, I do enjoy those. And so, in my opinion, this time of year, you can't go wrong with a McRib and a venti pumpkin spice iced cream chai or whatever it is. I think most of my memories of this time of year are rooted in my childhood, and I think that's pretty much all of us. Um, but this time of year, I remember in elementary school making all kinds of crafts and decorations for Thanksgiving. We made, of course, the hand turkeys, construction paper pilgrim hats. But I think the most unique thing we made for this time of year were bugle cornucopias. Uh, I'm assuming that most of us are familiar with what a cornucopia is. Kind of a horn shaped basket with the fruits of labor at harvest time uh, stuffed into it and falling out onto the table out of it. But when I was in first grade, we made bugle cornucopias, which we took a bugle and Duncan Hines ice cream, or not ice cream, icing, store bought icing in the little tubs, and M&Ms. And you stuff the bugles with the icing, and then put the M&Ms, stick the M&Ms in the icing to where it looks like they're falling out of the cornucopia. Another word for a cornucopia is a horn of plenty. But anyway, that kind of backfired on me that year in first grade um, because the gifted kids class made snowmen at Christmas time. And they made the snowmen on construction paper using uh, shaving cream and put used M&Ms for buttons on the snowmen. So when they came back to the regular class with their snowmen, the girl who sat in front of me, Courtney, was showing me her snowman, and she was somewhat of a prankster. She asked me if I wanted the M&M buttons off her snowman. I said, well, sure. I mean, being a fat kid, I wasn't going to, turn down candy. And I assumed that the snowmen had been made out of icing that we had used at Thanksgiving for the horns of plenty. I was wrong, and she did not tell me that they had used shower or razor cream, shaving cream. So I picked up the M&Ms, and of course I took a lot of what I thought was icing with them, and I popped them in my mouth, and I was in for quite a shock. She just laughed and laughed. I, on the other hand, did not find it quite as funny as she did. Another year in elementary school, I remember I believe this would have been maybe third grade or fourth. The teacher put wax pilgrim candles in the window. We came back on Monday and they were squatty melted blobs with deflated pilgrim hats. They looked like microwaved Weeble Wobble pilgrims with rather shocked and droopy faces. Turns out the heat from the sun through the window had melted the candles down over the weekend. But I believe my favorite thing from elementary school during Thanksgiving was the Thanksgiving meal that the lunchroom served. That for Etowah County school systems, during that time period, I'm not familiar with the current way of doing things, but during that time frame, when I was from kindergarten on through my senior year, the Thanksgiving meal in our lunchrooms were absolutely spectacular. The dressing was perfect. They served, I believe, chicken, corn, green beans, cranberry sauce, rolls, and maybe sweet potatoes. I can't remember. But I'm telling you what, that is some of the best meals we ever had. I've never really had a bad meal in the school lunchroom, but I believe that was something I looked forward to the whole year, was the Thanksgiving meal in the school lunchroom. So moving out of childhood traditions for Thanksgiving, there's a couple of things that I like to do now that I've been doing since probably I was a teenager. There's two movies that I watch this time of year. The first one is The Village by, and I'm going to butcher his name, and I'm sorry, M. Night Shyamalan. Anyway, I don't do horror movies, but this is a mind thriller with a huge twist at the end. I never watch it before Halloween, but there's just something about watching it in the fall time between Halloween and Thanksgiving. That's always been a tradition of mine. Absolutely love that movie. And the other movie that I consider a Thanksgiving movie that I really enjoy is Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. That's an absolute classic. You can't go wrong with Steve Martin and John Candy. John Candy, anything he's done has just been awesome. And in my mind, I always say automobiles, like the Asian guy from 16 Candles when Grandpa wakes him up on the front lawn and asks him where his automobile is. And I believe the guy's name is Long Duck Dong. But anyway, when he comes to and Grandpa's asking him where his automobile is, he says automobile. So that's how I always say automobile in my mind. And also, I believe my favorite part in that movie is when Steve Martin's character has rented a car and they've taken him out to the massive acres and acres of rental cars on the bus and drops him off, and the bus takes off and he realizes the car's not there. So he walks back to the airport and walks up to the car rental desk, and I don't know the actress's name, but she's one of my favorites. She's been in several different things. Redheaded lady. Anyway, she's on the phone and she's talking about Thanksgiving with her family and who's going to bring what. And when she ends the call, she says gobble gobble and then does a turkey noise, sort of like bloop, bloop. But anyway, I absolutely just roll on the floor, laugh. I just absolutely lose it when she does that. I just wish there was a way that I could get her doing that as a ringtone or a text tone on my phone. I would pay good money for that. So moving on, there's an uptick of hunting around this time of year. Personally, I just can't go sit out in the woods for hours and hours on end, waiting on some animal that may or may not show themselves, only to end up missing the shot. I don't have anything against it, and I encourage it, and I know many love it. I'll just settle for my meat coming from the meat case down at Johnson's. If you do go hunting, be sure not to find yourself in a pickle like one guy I know. He went out hunting with a group of his friends and needed to use the bathroom pretty badly. He got his roll of toilet paper and went in the woods as one does. He was wearing coveralls that you have to step into and pull up and put your arms through and then zip them up. Well, he unzipped and pulled them down and squatted to do his business. When he finished, he cleaned up, pulled up his coveralls, and went back to the truck and got in. They started on down the road, and the further they got down the road, the stronger the smell got, an awful smell. They finally pulled over, and he got out to see if he had stepped in something. And no, there was nothing on his shoes. And after more investigation, he realized that he had missed the ground completely when he did his business. Everything he meant to leave out in the woods had ended up in the back of his coveralls, and after he pulled it up, smeared across his lower back and rear end. So anyway, it's time for us to take a break now, and then when we come back, we'll do our main story, which is the story of the first Thanksgiving. So stay tuned. Welcome back. So let's jump into our main story for this episode, and that's the story of the first Thanksgiving. Celebrations and church observances of giving thanks go back to England and other European countries back to the 1500s. They usually took place during or after harvest time. The tradition made its way to the American colonies as people migrated from Europe, England more specifically. According to Wikipedia, the first documented annual Thanksgiving tradition occurred in 1619 in what is now the Commonwealth of Virginia. 38 English settlers landed in Charles City County, aboard the ship named Margaret on December 6, 1619. Immediately after landing in Virginia, they had a Thanksgiving celebration. The charter declared the day of our ship's arrival at the place assigned for plantation in the land of Virginia shall be yearly and perpetually kept holy as a day of thanksgiving to Almighty God. Since the mid-20th century, the original celebration has been commemorated there annually at the present-day Berkeley Plantation, ancestral home of the Harrison family of Virginia. Then there's the more familiar story where the Pilgrims and Puritans that had migrated from England in the 1620s and 1630s, who brought their tradition of days of humiliation and thanksgiving with them, and held a multi-day festival in 1621 in Plymouth Colony, prompted by a good harvest. However, this was However, this was not formally described as an official Thanksgiving holiday. Apparently, there was celebratory gunfire during the festival of which and I'm sorry, I'm going to butcher this name, Wampanoag natives responded to. On the natives' arrival, they accepted the offer to join the feast and celebration. The Wampanoag had a mutual defense treaty with the colonists, and along with the surviving, and I'm sorry, I'm going to butcher this name as well, Patuxet natives had helped the colonists the previous winter through food scarcity in exchange for an alliance and protection from their rivals, I'm sorry, I'm going to butcher this name as well, Narragansett tribe. Several different celebrations were held amongst communities during the year leading up to modern times. No formal dates were set and no set order of festivities. And I found this quite interesting. There was an even earlier documented Thanksgiving celebration recorded in St. Augustine, Florida on, when was that? September 8th, 1565. The Continental Congress declared the first national day of Thanksgiving on December 18th, 1777. On November 26, 1789, George Washington made the first official proclamation for Thanksgiving as president, proclaiming it as a day of public thanksgiving and prayer to be observed by acknowledging with grateful hearts the many and signal favors of Almighty God, and calling on Americans to unite in most humbly offering our prayers and supplications to the great Lord and ruler of the nations, and beseech him to pardon our national and other transgressions. So moving on to what would officiate the holiday as we know it today, Abraham Lincoln officially made it a federal holiday in 1863. On October 31st, 1939, or December 26, 1941, the dates are disputed, Franklin Roosevelt set the day to be the next to last Thursday in November to boost the economy. The extra 7 days from the previously recognized day of observance as the last Thursday in November was to allow for more time for Christmas shopping. So it seems like during the Great Depression, Roosevelt thought that it would be astute to give shoppers more time to shop to boost the economy. However, in my opinion, if they're going to buy something for Christmas, they're going to buy it before or after Thanksgiving. But anyway, that's just my opinion. So let's move on to Thanksgiving here in Alabama. In 1858, Alabama's governor, along with the governors of Mississippi, Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina, all proclaimed November 25th to be a day of Thanksgiving. However, it wasn't viewed as it is now, with all labor and business coming to a halt. There were church services in town, and a lot of shops in the towns attempted to close for the day, but people still came to town from the countryside to conduct their business. It was noted that the country folk generally overlooked the day and filled the towns either through not being aware of the proclamations or through just plain necessity. They just didn't have the luxury to set aside a day other than Sunday as a day of rest for the holiday. Oddly enough, many Southerners viewed Thanksgiving as more of a Yankee holiday, which makes sense as it started in the New England area, the British colonies, but it wasn't accepted until after the Civil War and well into the Reconstruction era, and then it started being celebrated widespread across the United States, especially in the South. So there you have it, the history of Thanksgiving, a short history anyway. I think it's interesting to take a look back and do some research on the history of holidays. Well, history of anything, just about. But then again, I'm rather a history buff. But it was quite different from the overly simplified story of Thanksgiving that I believe we were all taught as children. So it was nice to brush up on history and learn the true story behind Thanksgiving. And by the way, don't just ask some AI chat box the history on something because, in my opinion, AI is just not perfected enough to truly lay out and map out the nuances of such a storied history of a holiday or history of anything for that matter. But anyway, let's move on. I found a couple of fun facts about Thanksgiving. Do you know how TV dinners came about? Well, you have Thanksgiving to thank for that. In 1953, Swanson's had purchased far too many turkeys for the Thanksgiving season. 26 tons too much to be exact. Facing major losses on the overpurchase of those frozen turkeys, they invented the TV dinner to rid themselves of all that turkey. You couldn't keep turkeys frozen for a whole nother year. They wouldn't be fit to eat come the next Thanksgiving. So Swanson's set about to formulate a frozen meal that could be heated up in the oven for a quick convenience meal. And from that original TV turkey dinner, all the other TV dinners we have available to us nowadays came from that. Well, I think you could contribute almost all convenience foods from springing forth from that original idea in 1953 from Swanson's, trying to get rid of all those turkeys. And ever since then, America's been hooked on the TV dinner. Another Thanksgiving fun fact, well, it's not really Thanksgiving, but it involves a turkey, so I'm relating it to Thanksgiving. Ben Franklin suggested that the national bird should have been a turkey instead of the bald eagle. He said he felt as though the turkey was more respectable and a more recognizable native symbol for the United States. So, what's your idea of a traditional Thanksgiving meal? My personal idea is turkey, dressing, giblet or giblet gravy, however you want to pronounce that, yams or sweet potatoes of some variation, fruit salad with marshmallow puff sauce and cream cheese mixed in. I've not had anything quite close to that, and Aunt Margaret always made it for both Thanksgiving and Christmas. I think it was her take on ambrosia. From what I understand, ambrosia is fairly similar. I've never had true ambrosia, but I think that was her take on ambrosia. And of course, you've got some variation of corn, green beans. However, I do not like green bean casserole. I actually had one this week that was very good. The best one I've ever had, and I would eat that one again, but green bean casserole in general, it's off my menu. You got to have your potato salad, even though you've got sweet potatoes of some sort, rolls, cakes, and 2 kinds of pumpkin pie. At least that was the case in Aunt Margaret's household. For both Thanksgiving and Christmas, she would make 2 different kinds of pumpkin pie. The first one was your traditional pumpkin pie, which she made from scratch, and she would put a meringue topping on it and brown the meringue in the oven after the pie had been cooked. And she made another one the very same way, except in the pumpkin filling of this pie, she would add coconut, and she also added coconut to the meringue on top. And that was my favorite. I really enjoyed the coconut, and that was her favorite as well. However, Mama had food texture issues, so she couldn't do the coconut. So Aunt Margaret always made her one without the coconut. And another pie she would make was mincemeat pie. That was a favorite of hers. It was a favorite of Uncle John. Matter of fact, she usually only made it when he was going to be at Thanksgiving and Christmas. But she would make, if he was coming, she would make one, and probably it was just the three of us eating on that mincemeat pie through the holidays. Mama absolutely could not stand it, but it's one of my favorites. And of course, had to have a coconut cake and an orange date nut cake. Actually, I think Aunt Margaret only made the orange date nut cake for Christmas. But that is hands down my most favorite dessert of all time, besides banana pudding, of course. But anyway, that's what I grew up on. That's what I consider a traditional Thanksgiving meal. But I was interested to see what others considered a traditional Thanksgiving meal and what the early Thanksgiving celebrators ate. And according to what I've read, the first Thanksgiving celebrations would have included different types of fowl, pheasant, guinea, and of course, since they had to hunt for all their food, they would have deer. They would include mussels and lobsters, grapes and corn. Turkey though is thought to have been a later addition. I guess it was just whatever you had on hand or could hunt and could use to throw together to celebrate the Thanksgiving feast. But while naming all these Thanksgiving menus, it reminds me of the old fragile paper placemat my great uncle Pete sent home to his mama in one of his letters during World War II. It was the placemat from their Thanksgiving meal while he was fighting over in Europe. It had a turkey printed on it, and it included the menu for the meal. He would later lose his life shortly after enjoying that meal and sending that placemat back to his mother in his letter. So naturally, during this time, I always think of our military service members off away from home, either actively fighting or on a mission or just stationed somewhere, who have to be apart from their families during this time. I think we all need to remember that during the holidays, that not everybody can be at home with friends and loved ones and family. Well, it's that time again to take a break, so stay tuned. We'll be back in a minute. Welcome back. So let's talk about some of my family's traditions for Thanksgiving. We would always do Thanksgiving at Aunt Margaret's house, and family from out of town would come, and they would spend a few days before, and usually leave maybe a day or so after Thanksgiving. And we would eat meals every night at Aunt Margaret's up to the Thanksgiving meal there, Thanksgiving evening. But during that time, leading up to Thanksgiving and the day of Thanksgiving, there was lots of rook playing. It used to drive me insane when they would get together and play rook. And one, I don't know why this phrase made my skin crawl and toenails fall off, but every time I would hear someone yell, "Shoot the moon," I absolutely wanted to crawl under the couch. They loved it. And actually, I like to play cards now, and I would probably enjoy the game, but I've just never learned. I wished I had spent more time at the table fellowshipping with them while they were playing, and I might have learned how to play rook. But anyway, and of course, football. They would watch football, and we would eat Thanksgiving supper at Aunt Margaret's, and usually we would eat Thanksgiving lunch at my grandmother's on my dad's side, or we would eat before the actual Thanksgiving day. But anyway, there was always so much going on at the table, whether it was Thanksgiving or just a meal with the whole family at Aunt Margaret's. There were a lot of conversations going on at once, and Daddy was usually telling some story about his time at the steel plant, and me and Mama would be talking, and Aunt Pat would be talking to Uncle John, or anyway, there was a lot of conversations going on, and it for someone who was not in a specific conversation, it was hard to listen to them all at once and know what was going on. And that's usually where my Nanny Ree, or my maternal grandmother, found herself. She never was fully in on any one conversation. She would pick up bits and pieces from everyone's conversation and form a storyline in her mind that integrated all the stories, or at least that's what it seemed like. Um, there was one time somebody was telling a story about a girl having a baby, and then some man. There was another story about some man giving someone something, and maybe a third story going on. And then she piped up and she said, he gave her that baby. Well, of course, we didn't know what she was talking about and busted out laughing. And I just thought to myself, yeah, I guess the story about that girl having a baby, some man had to give her that baby. But anyway, another thing that kind of really got on my nerves, and let me back up and say, I have this thing about hearing people chew or smack. If I've heard you chew, then I have fantasized about taking that food out of your mouth. But anyway, my Nanny Ree was always a lady, so she had very good manners, and you didn't hear her chew most of the time unless she got a hold of a banana, and that was that I'm surprised my hair didn't fall out. But anyway, the thing that you heard when she ate was her swallowing, and bless her heart, she had a lot of trouble with her throat and her esophagus, and she would have to have her throat stretched from time to time. And yes, that's an actual medical procedure, and I would imagine a painful one too. But anyway, she would have to have her throat stretched, and she would have trouble when she would swallow. She would often get strangled or choked, or it was slow to go down, and it was very noisy. I can't explain it. It was like hearing someone gulp a 2 liter bottle of Sprite and hearing it actually go down, bubbling down in your esophagus to your stomach. But anyway, so you could always guarantee, or you could always count on her livening the atmosphere up with her throat problems. And I know she couldn't help it, and my heart went out to her, and I still feel bad about it today, but I absolutely wanted to melt and go through the floorboards under the house. It just absolutely drove me crazy. But anyway, we would eat and then clean up, and there would be a little pause, and we'd sit around and talk, and then out would come the coffee and dessert. And I always hurried and ate dessert. Um, and I would sneak after I would finish eating dessert. The adults would stay at the table and talk over their coffee and cake and pie, or actually dirty dishes by that point. And I would get up and I'd sneak off to the den. The den was my domain. That was my territory. It was the safe place as a child, away from the hustle and bustle going on in the rest of the house. That's where all my movies were. There was a TV, a couch, and a love seat. But anyway, I would sneak off in there, and I always had the original Grinch cartoon on VHS standing by. I wouldn't watch it any other time through the year except the night of Thanksgiving when I would sneak off from the adults in the dining room and go to the den. And I'd pop that video in and I would watch it. And I believe on that VHS, at the end of the Grinch cartoon movie, there was one called, I believe, Horton Hears a Who. And I never watched it. As soon as the cartoon Grinch ended, I would rewind it. Sometimes I would watch the Grinch again. But anyway, it wasn't until years later that I actually watched Horton Hears a Who. And for whatever reason, I don't know what it was about it, it just absolutely flipped me out. I don't know why the Who's didn't bother me in the Grinch cartoon movie, but for Horton Hears a Who, it absolutely messed with my mind. And I can't explain it. I don't know what it was. And of course, since I was off from school the next day, the day after Thanksgiving, I was able to spend the night at Aunt Margaret's. All of my life up until mid teenage years, from the time I was born, I would always stay Friday and Saturday night at Aunt Margaret's house. She basically halfway raised me. That was my home away from home. And so anyway, I was always happy to get to stay an extra night here and there, and then Thanksgiving night was one of those extra nights. And I always loved staying there because the next day, out would come the Christmas decorations. We'd spend that Friday decorating the tree and putting out all the Christmas decorations. And in her house, anything that was stationary, even stuff that wasn't nailed down or affixed to the house, if it just stood still long enough, she had a Christmas village on it, or fake plastic holly and candles. So the whole house was decorated for Christmas, and I don't know that me as a kid, that was just a great escape. I thoroughly enjoyed that, and if the couple of times that I did not get to help her decorate as a kid, I always felt slighted. It just was not the same. It really messed with my Christmas holidays if I wasn't there to help her. So she knew that, and she always made sure that she didn't decorate anything unless I was involved. So after having so many good memories of Thanksgiving from childhood, I of course wanted to start my own traditions when I got out on my own as an adult. I remember my first Thanksgiving on my own. I still, of course, went home for the actual day, but we had a Friendsgiving when I was at Jacksonville in my tiny little apartment. There were about 10 or so, and that little apartment was overflowing. People were literally sitting on the floor. But anyway, I, of course, went overboard and bought a huge frozen turkey way too close to the day. Um, I finally figured out that bird wouldn't be thawed and cooked through until New Year's. So I went out and bought some rotisserie chickens about an hour before the dinner. And I made the dressing the day before, of course. Everyone brought side dishes. Some were good, some were bad. We were all just college kids on our own for the first time, doing the best we could on the limited budgets we had. But it was a lot of fun. We loaded up a plate of leftovers after we ate and took it over to my disabled shut in neighbor that lived next to me at the time. I don't know if she was able to eat it or not, but it's the thought that counts, right? Um, a couple of the participants in that Friendsgiving that was of age brought some wine. That's just a foreign concept to me. My family never had wine at any meal or any occasion. It was not present at the table. I find, or I feel like that's more of a northern thing that some southerners picked up. I feel like just trying to be fancy. I never found dressing needed to be complemented by Boone's Farm strawberry fields, but that's just me. And then there was this weird girl that came to the Friendsgiving. She came with a plus one. She had originally been a plus one for one of the original Friends group member. However, they broke up weeks before the Friendsgiving, and for whatever reason, she thought her invite as a plus one of that Friends group member still stood, and she took it upon herself to bring a plus one for herself. She was just very rude and very odd. She chewed with her mouth open, and honestly, she looked like a moose chewing ice. She brought green bean casserole. Now, you know from earlier in the show how I feel about green bean casserole, and hers was no different. But hers was unique. I don't really know how to explain it, but it tasted like she had made potpourri in that pan before she whipped up that casserole. She was talking to me after we ate in the kitchen when we were cleaning up, and she asked me how I made my dressing, and I explained it to her that it was a multi-day event, and you have to cook your cornbread first, and then mix it all up. You boil a chicken, and anyway, she just looked at me dead in the eyes without any expression whatsoever. And she just told me that I shouldn't have went to all that trouble to make the dressing. And I just looked at her, and I didn't know where this was going. But anyway, she said, if I had been you, I would have just used stovetop. Well, my mouth hit the floor. I had never heard someone who was Southern say you could just have used stovetop. Now, don't get me wrong. I like stovetop. I like it a lot. However, it is not dressing. It's not even real stuffing. It's just a bread type dish that was based on the idea of stuffing. And you can buy the cornbread version of stovetop stuffing, but that in no way makes it dressing. That's like saying sitting in just because it's cornbread stovetop, that's like saying if you sit in a garage, that makes you a Buick. Two totally different things. But anyway, I feel like even though she came across as Southern or claimed to be Southern, she probably had many Yankee roots. I feel like she's the type of people who would have put peas and carrots in her chicken and dumplings if she had even ever heard of chicken and dumplings. Chicken and dumplings. And speaking of adulting on Thanksgiving, it seems that one of the busiest nights for local bars is the night before Thanksgiving, which makes sense. Everyone returns to their hometown to see and be with their family. And after a couple of days, they start to get a little weary and decide to escape the drama that sometimes breaks out when families get together. And they go down to the local watering hole to catch up with old friends who also find themselves there for the same reason. So if you find yourself downtown to have a beverage and to catch up with old friends, excuse me, back home, be sure to be responsible. You don't want to be seen at midnight standing on the side of the highway, confused in the daze of your drinks, trying to play Amazing Grace on a breathalyzer held by a state trooper. And one of the last things I want to talk about before we part ways today is the holiday potluck lunch at work. Now, I love a potluck, and I don't even like calling it a potluck because I feel like that's a very Midwestern or a Yankee term. But anyway, we all know what that means. Everyone brings a dish, and I love them. Some people are scared to eat what others bring because they don't know how clean their kitchen is or how clean their cooking is. Me, I mean, there are a few people in the past where I have avoided their dishes, but I just leave it up to God. I just pray over my food and hope for the best and have faith that it's going to be okay. And the taste generally takes my mind off the possible consequences in the end. But anyway, I love the variety. I love the different takes that different people have on dishes. And a lot of times when they put their own spin on things, it turns out pretty good. Sometimes it ends up being trash worthy. But anyway, one year at at my place of employment, I decided to bring taco soup. I thought that's easy. It'll be cheap. It's just a can of this, can of that, can of this, and cook it and bring it. Easy to keep warm. Everybody likes taco soup. So I started buying my ingredients. Went to the store. Got to have a can of this type of bean, that type of bean, four other types of beans, corn, taco seasoning, beef broth. Well, anyway, by the time and of course, you got to have the Fritos dippers, and everybody likes a little sour cream with it. So anyway, and I thought, well, better make some cornbread to go with it. In the end, I ended up spending right around $115 on that taco soup and all the fixings. And from then on, I just decided to bring cream corn. About 4 or 5 cans of 50-cent cream corn from Walmart, good as gold. And one time at another place of employment, there was this lady who brought a chocolate cake, and she had raved about it for weeks. Oh, this chocolate cake is so good. Everybody raves about it. They always want me to make it wherever I go. Well, I'm not a big fan of chocolate, but I thought if she's, you know, talked about it this much, I'm going to have a piece. So the day came, and she didn't show up for the lunch. At least not when we first started. But then, as people started finishing their meal, looking at the desserts, in she walked. And she was carrying a cake carrier. I thought, well, good. I'll be able to try her cake, chocolate cake. Well, she set the cake carrier down and took the top off of it, the dome, and I looked at it, and it was swimming in muddy water. And I knew right then I didn't want any part of it. So she had to leave to go to another engagement, and we started packing all the food up. And they took the cake, which no one had touched, to the kitchen, and they were talking about what to do with it. Nobody really wanted a piece, and because it was swimming in that muddy looking water at the bottom of the plate, and it looked like the chocolate icing was sweating, and it had a very weird smell about it. And I thought to myself, maybe this was one of those times that I should have exercised caution and just decided I didn't want any from the beginning. But anyway, someone got up enough courage to cut the cake to leave a couple of slices for the night people. Well, as soon as they poked the knife into the cake, it released air that was under pressure. There's no polite way to put this, but it absolutely pooted. And if you have ever seen National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, when Clark goes to cut open the turkey at the table and it explodes out and releases pressurized steam, this was very reminiscent of that. I still to this day do not know what the watery, muddy brown liquid was gathered in the bottom of that plate that the cake sat on. And the more I think about it, I probably don't want to know. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. I want to thank you for joining me on this episode. And as this Thanksgiving season rolls on, let's take a minute to remember those who may be serving in the military and away from their families during this season, or people who may be working all the way across the world. Anyone separated from their friends and family at this time, let's remember them. And also, let's just give thanks. Let's find things we were thankful for and thank the good Lord for them. If you have a story that you would like to tell me and maybe me possibly cover on the show, or if you have a question that you would like answered on the show, or a piece of advice on a topic or situation that you would like input on, or if you just have a comment, I'd love to hear from you. You can email us here at the show. Let's see, our email address is contactdownhomeshow@gmail.com. I welcome any input you may have. I'd love to hear from you. And join us next time when we kick off the Christmas season. We've got lots of interesting stuff and laughs. So come back in a couple of weeks and we'll kick off the Christmas season. Thanks for listening.